Why should you move to Portugal? Here are 10 reasons. But we could give you 10 million. Or just one. Our mild weather. All year round. On average, over 3,000 hours of sunshine a year. Our food and drink. Wanna try it? Every day? You're gonna like it. Our people. We are passionate, friendly, hard-working, language speakers, genuine, and curious about other cultures. Welcome you with arms open wide. Feeling safe? Knock on wood, but according to the Global Peace Index 2018, Portugal ranks as the 4th safest country in the world out of a list of 163 countries. Our diversity. Greater Lisbon. The Silver Coast. Greater Porto and Douro. The Alentejo. The Algarve. And of course, the Azores and Madeira. Quality of life. According to Expat Insider 2018, Portugal ranks 6th out of 68 world destinations. First among European countries. About 8 out of 10 people feel at home here. We were also distinguished by World Travel Awards as the world's best destination in 2017. Creativity and innovation. We're the oldest nation in Europe, but we always find creative solutions for our issues. The Portuguese caravela is just one example. Today, we have many more. We have a user-friendly environment for digital nomads and laptop entrepreneurs. We will be holding the website for the next 10 years. Here, you can be active. Or just enjoy the silence. Overall, pretty okay, hmm? Come and join us and find out for yourself. Welcome to Portugal.
Hi everyone, we hope you have enjoyed this short intro movie about Portugal. My name is Ana Margarida and I'm based in Portugal.
And I am Vitor, I'm in Algarve. We are now going to share with you a bit more information about Portugal, its current labor market situation, living and working conditions, and some tips on how to try to find a job down here.
So these are the topics me and Vitor will try to cover. Some facts and figures about Portugal as a country, the most recent trends in our labor market and particularly focusing on the areas where you can still find a job, some important aspects to bear in mind when you think of living or working in Portugal, how and where you can learn Portuguese, some hints on how to search for a job, things you should bear in mind when applying to a Portuguese employer, and also if and when you are moving to Portugal. And finally, we'll leave you with our contacts, how you can find us if you need our advice or help. So let's share with you a few facts about Portugal. So to start with, we are this rectangle right next to the Atlantic, facing the Atlantic in the western coast of Europe. As you can see, we are having more than 10 million inhabitants. This makes of us maybe not a big country. Of course, we are still small when compared to Italy, but we are maybe a medium-sized country when compared to the average in Europe. More than half of our population is in the labor market. we're not such a densely populated country when compared to other countries in the center of Europe. Still, within the country, we can find quite densely populated regions. Of course, you can see that whereas Lisbon metropolitan area, only this little area has more than 1/3 of the Portuguese population. A region like Alentejo, right next to Lisbon, has more than 1/3 of the territory and much less than 1/10 of the population. So we are organized by regions, but we have a centralized structure in terms of public administration. So in the mainland, we're actually having a centralized government, let's say. Our political regime, we're working with a parliamentary republic, just like you do. We have a semi-presidentialist system where the president has some powers. And what I was saying about centralized government, we have two honored exceptions. The Azores and Madeira, these archipelagos, are autonomous regions and have their own regional governments with their own laws as well. You should also bear in mind that among our population, more than 10% is foreign country, coming from a foreign country. And we have as an official language the Portuguese, and our capital is Lisbon, Lisboa for us, Lissabona for you. Regarding the economy, as you can see from this graphic, you can see that we have nearly 70% of our workers focused on the service sector. Industry plays a minor role in our economy, around 15%, not much more than that. And as well, agriculture, forestry and fishing have been reduced to around 5% at the moment. So we are really very much tertiarized as an economy. Some more data, as you can see here, we were facing an increasing trend, a recovery trend up until 2019. In that year, we still had a positive growth rate of 2.5% in our GDP. Unfortunately, last year, as I would say all of the countries around the world, we had a strong recession and we had a negative growth rate of 7.7%. So it was really severe to our economy, this pandemics. Nearly 99% of our business, our companies are micro or small and medium enterprises. So of course, if you are intending of moving to Portugal, you should expect to be integrated in this type of company. Some of these are as well startups. In the last few years, we have some dynamics in a few sectors with new companies, but it's important that you know, that you are aware that this type of companies is responsible for 76.5% of employment in Portugal. And also the private within the private sector, it's almost 2/3 of the jobs are also in the service sector. So this is really showing that our economy is really very much focused in the service sector. The months during which you will find more job vacancies available for Portugal will be within May and July, and of course in the peak of the winter, it's more difficult for you to find a job in here. Of course, this also has a lot to do with the importance of the tourism sector in our economy, which is now a bit more reduced due to the pandemics, but we hope this is temporary as much as possible. Also, it's very likely that you will find more easily a job in the metropolitan areas, Greater Lisbon and Greater Porto. This is also where the companies more open to recruiting from other countries are located. And you should also expect some seasonal effects in terms of employment in the traditional sectors, agriculture, tourism, and hotels and restaurants, and so on. Of course, during 2020 and 2021, this sector will not recruit that much abroad. You must be aware of that. Sharing with you as well some trends in our labor market. As you can see from this graphics, unemployment was reducing, was having a decreasing trend since 2013, where we had reached a peak of more than 700,000 unemployed job seekers, and it had decreased down to less than half of this, around 300,000 unemployed job seekers in 2019. Of course, with the pandemics, the numbers have started to increase again. And it's important as well that you know that even though it didn't increase that much, this is also very much due to the emergency measures which were taken by the government, namely simplified layoff, one of the most important measures, which only last year involved more than 1 million workers. Fortunately, this year the number is a bit more reduced. At the moment, we are having nearly 300,000 workers covered by these work contract suspension measures. So these 300,000 should be added to the ones that we're having right now, which are at the moment a little bit more than 400,000 unemployed job seekers. As you can see as well, so these are the numbers from March. Unfortunately, nearly 40% of unemployed job seekers are in this situation for more than 1 year now. So this is becoming structural as well. It might mean that they will need some reconversion as well. And this is also a situation which affects a lot young job seekers. And this is not so evident here, but you will see later on that it's really affecting particularly young job seekers, and namely those who are entering the labor market right now. So as you can see here, when we compare unemployment rates between Portugal, Italy, and the EU, you would find probably that Portugal was facing a lower level of unemployment, and this is true. But then if you go to the youth unemployment rate, is really very high, above the EU average, definitely. Of course, Italy has a much higher youth unemployment rate, but it's still significantly high for us, quite severe for young people. Having said this about the labor market, which is not very well performing, there are still a few sectors recruiting actively from out of Portugal, namely the customer service, and particularly contact centers, and in particular regarding inbound roles, and as well shared service centers. We have located in Portugal a few hubs of business service, so service within a company, a multinational company, concentrating the functions of HR, administration, accountancy, control management, sales in Portugal. And for all of these, companies require specific language skills, and Italian is among the most required, just for you to know. Then, of course, within the ICT and digital sector, we have several shortages. Many companies in Portugal, we have a lot of slightly bigger companies, but also a lot of startups within the ICT sector. And software, web, and multimedia programmers and developers are some of the areas where we have a bigger number of job vacancies, just for you to have an idea. All IT engineers of all sorts, I would say. And then going a bit more into other roles within digital, also now content reviewers, SEO optimization, search on the web. This kind of functions are also sometimes requiring very technical or language skills as well. And our companies are as well open to recruiting from abroad, even without the Portuguese knowledge. Then we have, of course, the healthcare sector, which is probably a common ground to most of the countries in Europe. Most of us have shortages within healthcare, and this has been made evident now during the pandemic crisis. We already had shortages before the pandemics, before COVID-19, but particularly in some specializations. Now, of course, intensive care has become more critical. But what I have to tell you regarding healthcare is that even though we need professionals, the working conditions offered, namely the wage levels, are not so appealing. The public hospitals are the main employer in Portugal, so the public healthcare system, and they cannot, for budget reasons as well, go much beyond some level. And also the professional recognition procedures are not that easy. Of course, you know, this is common to all countries in Europe. You would need to go through a professional recognition procedure because you are, of course, dealing with patients. You need, for instance, to have a certain level of the language. So I would say minimum B2, even though it's not an official criterion. It's to present a certified level of the language. The professional orders for medical doctors and nurses are really being very strict in terms of the professional recognition procedures you have to go through, just for you to bear that in mind. Mostly now at the moment. And within agriculture, you will always find opportunities, seasonally, of course, mostly within the spring and early summer, with fruit picking and greens picking, but mostly fruit picking. We are recruiting transnationally, but it's also true that our employers within the sector are recruiting a lot third country nationals, and we must admit that the conditions offered are not as well the most appealing. It depends on what you want to do, but bear that in mind. This doesn't mean that you cannot find a job in other areas, in other occupations. Simply you have to bear in mind that it will be almost impossible for you to find a job in Portugal in other areas than these without having the Portuguese language knowledge, because employers are not that open to it.
Now I will give you some information about work conditions in Portugal. And let's start by wages or monthly earnings. Definitely is this not the main reason why you should move to Portugal. Still, you have some idea about what to expect, mostly if you have no or little experience. Our minimum monthly wage is now 665 euros per month. The average monthly earnings in the whole labor market take into account levels of qualification, seniority, and expertise are close to 1,190 euros per month. This means a bit more than 16,630 per year as an average annual package. We will now show you just a few indicative wage ranges in the areas where you will find more vacancies in Portugal. If you have no or little experience, minimum up to 5 years experience, these are only a reference and based on surveys by a well-known HR consultant, reports by people who are currently working in our labor market. Most are based on the annual package, which is the basis for negotiation in the most qualified occupations. But, for example, regarding the differences between Lisboa and Oporto, and in this table we have the contact centers and the shared service centers, for example. And here we have a table in the wages in ICT and digital marketing in Portugal. You can see the difference between Lisbon and Oporto and in the different professions in this sector. And here we have a table with the wages in engineering in the different professions. In the previous tables, the wages are based on annual package, which is the basis for negotiation in the most qualified occupations. But, for example, regarding the tourism sector, since it's mostly a seasonal activity, we will give you references on a monthly basis. Now, let's talk about the labor contracts. The main labor contracts in Portugal are the contract for an undetermined period, a fixed-term contract, and a temporary work contract. Note that the fixed-term employment contract cannot exceed 3 years and must be formalized by writing. And we have also another types of contract for indefinite duration, very short term, and teleworking, etc. And now about work conditions. Lisbon is the area where you have the highest wages in Portugal, but it's also the area where you have the highest cost of living, and in particularly when it comes to the housing. As a rule, we work 14 hours per week. As far as holidays are concerned, we are entitled to 22 days per year. When you have a short work contract, for example 6 months or 1 year, you earn the right of 2 days for each month worked. Now about Social Security and taxes. Workers have to pay 11% of their wage to Social Security. The employers have to pay from the brute salary 23.75% of to Social Security, and the freelancers have to pay 21% of the income that they declare. ERS is based on annual amount of income received by usually people living in Portugal. Regarding work-related income, there is a retention of certain amount for the monthly wage, which is variable according to the person's marital and family status. And here we have the wage is paid 14 times a year, and you have right to receive holidays and Christmas. And the minimum wage is 665 euros per month. And here we have the ERS rates, annual rates. The different rates are related with the work-related income and the retention of certain amount of monthly wage, which is variable, as I said before, with person's marital and family status. And just for you to have an idea, this is just an example of net monthly wage calculation for a single person with no children. For 1,200 euros gross wage plus daily meal allowance, the net wage after deductions would be 881 euros. And the mean allowance at this moment is 4 euros and 77 cents.
Let's now turn a little bit more to living conditions in Portugal. And when talking about this, it's important for you to bear in mind that accommodation is not cheap in Portugal. This is one of the main factors you should bear in mind. Mostly when compared to Italy, I would say you will notice that Portugal is a little bit more expensive on average than Italy. Of course, it will depend on the cities you are comparing, but still, believe me. There are many websites offering rental and buying accommodation in Portugal, with more coverage for the Lisbon and Porto metropolitan areas. Real estate agencies and newspapers are also good ways for you to find quality housing to rent or buy. Even though, of course, nowadays we are resorting much more to online media, the newspapers, either they are nationwide or regional or local, they publish advertisements on a daily basis for rental, it's called aluga-se, or for sale, vende-se, okay? And it's important that when you are dealing with real estate agencies, please always make sure that when doing your search, the agency that publishes the ad or with which you are going to negotiate has a real estate brokerage license. It's not that common to find real estate which is not licensed. Still, beware, since you are at a distance, it's important that you make sure of this. Also, of course, you will know that the rents vary according to location, to the quality, to the typology of housing that we're talking about, and of course the number of rooms of the apartment, for instance. You should count maybe, just for you to have an idea, throughout the country, it could vary from 400 to 1,200 euros per month for a studio. And if you're talking, for instance, about an apartment with 2 rooms, you could have variations between 600 euros and 2,300 euros per month. And in this case, we're mostly talking about the metropolitan areas. But still, of course, it can be quite variable and it will depend on a lot of things. It's also important that you know that you have to count on a 1-month payment in advance. Rental contracts are written and their duration is agreed between the parties. However, if the contract does not have a predefined duration, it is considered valid for 2 years. As I was saying, at the start of the lease, it is customary to pay a deposit equivalent to an additional month's of rent. It could go up to 2 months, and this month corresponds to the month of notice that the tenant must respect when informing the landlord of his intention to set the accommodation free. So imagine you are thinking of moving. This is also why we pay that month in advance. Still referring to housing, in the last slides we were going back, the sources were mainly websites where you can look for accommodation. In here you can find information about a cost of living website which is called Expatistan, and existing for several countries. You can take a look at it, and you can take a look here of some average expenses you would find in terms of housing, things you have to bear in mind And of course, this is relative, but you have some examples in here. You can also find from another website, so that you can have an idea of the variation depending on the regions. The average price per square meter of accommodation in the whole of the country. So in the 7 regions of the country, as I showed you before, we have 7 regions. So for instance, the metropolitan area of Lisbon with the highest level, as you can see, 12.5 euros per square meter. And then the center region with 6.4. But of course, it is very difficult as well to find accommodation, even though the prices are much lower. It is not that easy to find available accommodation in other regions, let's say more in the province, so away from the greater areas, so the metropolitan areas. So this is an example of costs. Of course, we could go through it all, but no need. You will also find some other references about cost of living in terms of food, and this is actually very, very relative, because you could find variations between supermarkets or traditional commerce. And also some references in terms of entertainment, which has not been that much in the past few months, but these are references you could find, and all of these are up to date as much as possible. But these are just references, and you will have a few other websites where you can take a look at information about cost of living in Portugal. But I would just like to give you an example of what it is, because some of the vacancies probably you will find for Italian speakers in Portugal are within the customer service, and this is not a very well-paying sector, we would say, in general. Okay, but also it's not only the wage which is moving you, or which is having you move to another country. There are plenty of other factors you can decide about. And I would say this is just an example. We made this simulation based on the example Victor was giving about a wage of 1,200 euros. And so this is the gross wage. We have seen previously that after taxes and social security contributions, you would have around 1,000 euros. And then let's just make a simulation about what could cost you the whole package. So imagine per month you will have to, of course, to pay your rent. You will have water, electricity, and gas to pay, which are usually not included in the rental. It may happen, but it's not very common. Also, what you would pay, for instance, for a phone, TV, and internet package, cable TV and internet package, around 40 euros. Regarding transports, if you think of a monthly pass, which is an intermodal monthly pass, you can use several types of transports. It would cost you, it could go from 30 to 40 euros. If you don't move, for instance, if you don't change municipality, if you're only living in Lisbon, you will only pay 30 euros, for instance. But this is just an example. In terms of food, supermarket, you will see that it is a bit less expensive than in Italy, in Portugal. So maybe with well-managed 200 euros would be enough for you to live during a month. Of course, let's have an idea that regarding health-related expenses, hopefully you won't still have these expenses every month. Eventually, yes, depending on your state of health. But and then, of course, you have to consider at least 1 or 2 nights out, some expenses with leisure. And with all of this, we would come to around 900 euros, 910 euros of expenses per month, which deducted to the net amount you saw up there of 1,000 euros would give you around 90 euros, 93 euros of savings in the end of the month. Meaning, it's not impossible to live in Portugal with this type of money. Actually, there are plenty of people who do. Also, plenty of foreign people moving to Portugal who do. And also don't forget that for these companies, namely within customer service recruiting, they usually support you in finding accommodation. And in the first months, even though at the moment we are in a completely in a difficult situation due to the pandemics, but usually they support you in finding accommodation. Very often they even have apartments which can be shared by 3 or 4 people with separate rooms, and where of course the cost of accommodation will be lower because you will share it, and therefore, just for you to have it as a reference, it's not impossible. You can live with it. I would still leave you with a few other links about living, cost of living, and not only. So regarding cost of living, you can always take a look at the information we already make available on the EURES portal. You can find the link here. Expatistan is the one we gave as an example, but also Numbeo is a really good website where you can compare the cost of living in 2 or 3 different cities. And therefore you can, for instance, compare the cost of living in Turin, or in Rome and in Lisbon for different types of items. And a few other websites you can take a look at. Also regarding accommodation, regarding the look for a house the search for a house to rent. These are some of the websites which are most used. And maybe with more offer, let's say. You can also find here some websites with useful information about the healthcare system and how to get access to it. And we have also included here some information about COVID-19 measures. Some of these websites don't have information in English, and definitely don't have information in Italian, but I believe that you will understand the majority of the information, because even though it's different languages, we have the same roots. So Portuguese and Italian, you can find some similarities. So these are 2 websites. The first one is referring to lockdown measures, which fortunately at the moment are being reduced. And the second one is more related to the state status of the pandemics in Portugal, and also more specifically related measures also regarding vaccination with the healthcare itself. Then you have information about education. You can also find some information about Portugal international schools, school equivalence, academic recognition. Also some interesting websites regarding leisure and cultural activities all over the country, I would say. Also cinemas, really interesting websites for you to take a look at. And of course, you should not neglect the information the Italian embassy has to offer you. So we have the Italian embassy in Lisbon, and of course this information is in Italian, so it has an increased value for you. And also It's an important website you can always take a look at if you have doubts, and this one is usually, the information is also available in English, is ePortugal, which is kind of the public service gateway. If you want to find, if you have to deal with public administration somehow, in principle you will find the service you are looking for in this website. Something you should also have to decide about if your plans go through moving to Portugal is to learn Portuguese. And actually, I'm not sure whether you knew this, but did you know that Portuguese is on top 10 of most spoken languages in the world? It is actually, if considering native speakers, it's actually the 5th most spoken language in the world by native speakers. And if you consider the positioning of EU languages, European languages, in this ranking, at the world level, you have first English, then Spanish, then French, and the 4th most spoken language is Portuguese. Just for you to bear that in mind, because it's really a good investment for you to make. How can you learn Portuguese? Of course, you would probably prefer to learn it on site in a classroom, and there are some options you can use for that, also in Italy already. But nowadays, the e-learning would be the easiest way for you to get access to language learning, I would say. Camões Institute is the one responsible for promoting the Portuguese language learning throughout the world. They coordinate a network of European language centers and cátedras in universities all around the world. In Italy, we have a Portuguese language center in Milan and at least 10 cátedras in several universities all over Italy. I could mention a few. I know there is one in Milan, several in Rome, Bologna, Lecce, Napoli, and these are just 5, but there are 10, believe me, Firenze as well. So you have several options if you want to learn Portuguese, even on site. Apart from this, Camões Institute also offers language courses online, just like Goethe or Alliance Française or any other. And you can register yourself in the website. These courses are paid for, but they have the advantage of being certified according to the European Common Framework for Languages. So A1, A2, B1, B2, etc. And depending on the level of tutoring you would have, they may be a little bit more expensive, but compared to the prices which are being practiced in other institutes, I would say it's not that expensive, even if you compare to English or French, where you have lots of offer. Then you have the courses offered on a free of charge basis by the High Commissioner for Migrations, which is the body responsible for integrating foreign nationals in Portugal. You can take a look at these links that I'm sharing with you. And it's also important that you know that we have, just like the Cambridge system or TELC system, we also have an official exams system for the Portuguese language, which is coordinated by the language university, the language faculty in the University of Lisbon. And you can find a little bit more information about it in this link and as well in Camões Institute website. Besides these more official means to learn the language, you have several other online platforms you can use, free of charge, some of them. Of course, some of them will have some advertising in between, but I would say bear in mind mostly that European Portuguese is a bit different from the Brazilian Portuguese. So if you can, please try to choose, if you really want to come to Portugal, try to choose the European Portuguese option. It will be much easier for you to adapt. And also you can find several apps for your mobile to learn Portuguese, and you can find them there. You will have these presentation after today, and in that link you can find several apps to learn Portuguese as well. And of course within YouTube you will find several of small courses or series of episodes about learning Portuguese delivered by several Portuguese teachers around the world, I would say.
And where to find a job in Portugal? In our days, contact network is still very important. Also, the national and regional ads in the newspapers. But with the new technologies, you can also search for a job in the job portals, in the company's websites, in the LinkedIn pages, in Facebook pages, or in virtual job fairs. Also, we have on-site job fairs, but the new technologies are very important in our days. For example, do you know that 33% of the Portuguese companies have a LinkedIn page? When deciding to apply for a job in Portugal, here are some of the websites that you can resort to. Besides, of course, of the Euros portal, which we would always recommend you to pay a visit to, there is EFP Online, the job bank from the Portuguese Public Employment Service. I'm afraid for now that you can only apply via this once you are already living in Portugal. But these vacancies are as well made available through the Euros portal, so not a big issue. Some of these are mostly dedicated to IT, others to the tourism sector, but I would mention mostly the first two, jobs in Lisbon and jobs in Porto, where you can find vacancies for English and also French speakers. Good for those who haven't started yet to learn Portuguese. And here you have some example of companies that are recruiting in Portugal. Some of these companies are Portuguese companies, and the others are international companies that have a branch office in Portugal, but they are recruiting too here. The companies that you are seeing here, we will participate in an event that will take place in the next 20th of May in the European Online Job Days platform. It will be the digital all job move in Europe. It's an event related with the technologies, IT, and if you want to participate, don't forget to register in the Online Job Days platform. And how to apply for a job vacancy in Portugal. First, you can send the motivation letter with your CV. Don't forget that photo is highly recommended. And your CV should be in reverse chronological order or functional model. Infographic models are more and more popular these days. Your CV should have 1 or 2 pages, should be short, concise, and structured. And if you don't speak or write Portuguese, write your CV in English. You can use your Europa CV model. And don't forget to include the previous employers and include the links to their websites. Include your educational background, links to web pages where you find info about the course's contents. And if you are outside of Portugal, don't forget to deal in your phone the country's international code. And include a Skype, Google Meet, Teams account in your LinkedIn profile, because in nowadays companies we will see your LinkedIn profile to analyze your application. And here are some things you should consider before you move to Portugal. First of all, you should have an ID card or a valid passport. Ask your employer to send you the working conditions written or ideally the work contract by email before you come. It's also important that you Know the wage payment method and frequency in advance. In Portugal, the most current practice is to pay on a monthly basis by bank transfer. So this should be the rule, but check. Usually the wage is paid on the last week of the month, from 22 onwards, depending on companies. Some employers may offer you support in finding accommodation, but that is not the rule. Try to find an apartment or bedroom before you move. Mostly, if you move in the summer, you can be quite difficult to find a place to stay in reasonable prices. One of the first things you should do when you arrive into Portugal, after you have fixed accommodation, is to get a proof of address in Junta de Freguesia. Only after you have this, you can take care of your fiscal number, which is essential to you to be able to sign your work contract, to open a bank account, and to take care well as the social security number. If you plan to stay for longer than 3 months, register yourself and eventually your family with the local authorities.
Just leaving you a short note about our return program. In case there is any Portuguese immigrant or family or relatives in the audience, this is basically a group of measures made to support those Portuguese citizens or family who might want to go back to Portugal to work. And this includes a more favorable tax regime to start with for a few years, a credit line supporting the investment in business startups, or eventually the buying of a share in an already existing company. Also hiring incentives to Portuguese immigrants if they decide to accept a contract in Portugal. This also goes passes by allowing for the online registration of these job seekers in our Public Employment Service Job Bank, IEFP Online. And of course, in order for you to be able to register in this platform, you need to have either a citizen card or social security direct system. Therefore, it's not open to everyone, but still it's important that you know it exists. Finally, we would just like to leave you with our contacts for US Portugal. You can find our website here, our website. If you have any question about moving to Portugal or living in Portugal, you can also contact us through our functional mailbox, this generic mailbox. We are on social media, Facebook and LinkedIn, and in these pages you can find sometimes a few opportunities as well for Italian speakers moving to Portugal. And we have also a YouTube channel you can take a look at. We are as well on the Eurus chat on Fridays from 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. Central Europe time, so your time. And we are having a personalized advice service, which eventually, if you want to take, if you want to have a more personalized advice, more into depth, you can also come to us for this. And for now, that's all. Before we leave, we will just show you a short testimonial of an Italian researcher currently working in the north of Portugal, in Braga.
I am Nadia Licciardello and I work as a research fellow at the International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory, INL, Braga. I come from Italy, and in particular from Sicily, this big island in the south. But before coming to Braga, I have moved a lot around Europe. I have lived in Western Germany, then in Strasbourg in France, and then again in Dresden in the Eastern Germany. So it's about 8 years that I am outside of Italy. I wanted to go back to a place that is a bit more similar to Italy, so with a milder weather and a culture much more close to it. And well, since also my partner is Portuguese, we thought that Portugal would be a good fit for both of us, and INL, that is a nanotechnology center, could offer me the place to perform the research I am passionate about. I am a materials chemist, so I work with different materials and nanoparticles and nanotechnologies for different applications. In the past, I was working for biological applications and also environmental applications like water cleaning and so on. But right now, I moved a little bit and I work here on aerospace applications. And I like it very much because I think it's also the future. I have to say that it's a process that is still going on since I moved here just in last June. But in general, I can say that it was much easier to settle here than in other countries where I have been, because the culture here is much more similar to Italian one, and people are very friendly, welcoming. The weather and the landscapes are super beautiful, and food is also very good. I really like to work here at the International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory, INL, because it's a very multicultural environment, and they have a very great team to also help us to settle in. So when we arrive, we have 3 months of help, let's say, for all the things that we might need. And then the groups are very international, so we are in contact with researchers from all over the world. And in addition, we have all the facilities and all the tools that are needed to work in nanotechnologies. So yes, I like it here and I'm happy.
Thank you for your time. Feel free to ask us your questions on the chat for the next few minutes.
And hope to see you soon in Portugal.